I'm Leroy, currently CEO of Taiwan Startup Stadium, startup program in Taiwan that helps Taiwan startups to go global. And before that, I was a partner at a Big Four firm, and for the last few years, I've been fairly active within the startup ecosystem. I've been investing in startups and working with startups and advising startups on how they go about in terms of both going overseas and how they operate internally. So. Okay. Well, I think the first thing is how you look at ecosystems around Asia, right? And for the last 5-6 years, everyone have been building their own system, right? They're trying to build something from scratch, and we copy a lot of stuff from Silicon Valley, right? So that has been the trend, and to be honest, Taiwan has been, if not at the forefront, but at least at the leading position, right? So if you look at the Taiwan ecosystem, I like it how a few things that is kind of different from a lot of the other ecosystem. First, there's very strong government support, right? So I think that's important when you come to a new location, and this is what you need, right? Second, I think there's still a lot of very strong verticals in Taiwan, right? You talk about medical, right? You talk about agriculture, you talk about e-commerce, right? So when you have a more diversified, there's actually more opportunities for startups to engage in that ecosystem. And overall, I think it's just how the location, right? You know, is it the right place for you? And I think Taiwan, you would agree, is a very friendly place. It's easy to get around, and I think those are some of the things that startup founders should consider. Actually, it's a very complex question. I think first of all, it's very easy to look at. First of all, there's no such thing as an Asian market. People talk about Asia, and there's this Asian market, but if you really look into it, Asia is a very fragmented market, right? That's the first thing. The next thing is then, which one should we go first, right? And a lot of people look at it as, how about population, right? So population, you go China, India, maybe Japan, then down to Vietnam. If we go down a little bit, it would be more Thailand. And of course, then Taiwan is sort of further down. But if you really think about it, I don't think it's as simple as that. If you really pick by population, no one would be operating in Hong Kong or Singapore, right? And also at the same time, it's not just about GDP. So I think in terms of strategically where you decide on your location is something a lot more complex. So if I look at it, it's not just Taiwan market, but whether Taiwan is a strategic operating unit for your startup, right? And if you look at that, Taiwan actually is fairly appealing, right? You have very strong government support, right? You have a fairly international community, right? You have strong verticals, you have manufacturing capability, right? You have strong talents. When I say talents, I don't mean just knowledge, right? You have talents in terms of they're committed, right? They're hardworking, something that is very unique in Taiwan. And you also talk about generally, if you decide on a location, whether it's a good place to live, right? If you look at all those things, then Taiwan is actually very competitive, or actually very super appealing for a lot of the startup founders when they decide which is the first country they want to get in when they get into Asia. I would love to be able to summarize all the efforts, which is impossible. What I really like about Taiwanese government when they approach the startup ecosystem is they have a really open attitude, right? So they're not saying, all right, we have figured everything out, so we're just going to do this and that, right? So yes, they have a lot of resources. They've committed a lot of resources through different ministry and different operating units, but at the same time, and also investments. But I think Taiwan, and being a very democratic country, is that they listen, right? They never think, we have figured everything out. So I think that is important. So therefore, for startup, I think this is really all you can ask for. Regulations, everything is always going to be a catch-up game, right? And this is true for anywhere, not just Asia, anywhere. But go to a place where the government sees startup and entrepreneurship as a strategic initiative for the country, not for you, their country, right? Then this is when you know you're going to the right place. All right, this is a great question, right? And I think this is where HealthForAll, for our, this initiative, we can do a better job, right? For corporates, I think if you really look at corporates, right, they're huge. They have all these different departments, business units. They have the KPIs. They're listed companies. They know what they need to do, right? And they have this core business. When we talk about innovation, I think sometimes we look at innovation. Is this something that's related to what they, at the core of what they do, right? But no one's going to innovate like that on day one. It's not possible, right? So I use this word quite a bit. I say corporate today are the new startups. For them, this whole innovation game, for a lot of them, not all of them, but for quite a few of them, is a new thing. What should we do, right? All these very interesting startups, and they have seen startups indeed have changed the world. So they're trying to figure out how can we engage with them, right? So yes, it's about matchmaking, it's about hackathons, it's about all these events. I see those are necessary steps for them to gradually, they have to learn, right? And it's something that every company would have their own culture and process to take control of that knowledge and leverage it to the best of their advantage. So I think we are seeing some corporates I've seen in Taiwan specifically have changed their attitudes dramatically in the last 3 years, right? They started fairly simple, they want to see something, but they really want to do something different now. So I see that as a process, and there will be more corporates coming in, and they will have their ideas, and that will evolve. So I think as long as we all have to be patient. I think sometimes we see this innovation as in this quick solution, everything will change forever if a corporate and startups meet. And no, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a process where everyone learns. For the startup, I think it's important for them to understand when they approach a corporate, what are they looking for? Especially a lot of the software startups, if they still haven't figured out where the core value is, when they approach corporates, they are too focused trying to get a POC or some projects going. You become building something for them, not for who you're trying to do, right? Like technically, not technically, well, by definition, startup is supposed to address a new market, something that no one actually really understands. That's the whole point about startups, right? If you're doing something that everyone understands, that you're building a program, right? That's not a startup. That's just a system integrator. Which is a great business to be in. Startup by definition is you don't really know. You have a vision, but you don't really know what that market is, what that needs are, and that's ultimately what you want to address. And if that is something you are not sure about yourself, and you work with corporates, sometimes you might get diverted into different areas. So I think it's both sides, right? Corporate needs to understand they need to learn. Startups need to understand they need to be more clear about what they can actually offer. And hopefully with this platform and a lot of stuff that we do, we can make sure they connect much better and have more success down the road. Okay, so a very difficult question. I don't know if I can speak on behalf of all the startups, but one thing I would strongly recommend all startups is, especially if you're earlier stage startups, right? If you're more mature, at a more later phase of your development, it's a different thing. But if you're kind of early, you're C stage, maybe pre-A, even A, right? Or A, or even B rounds, fairly early. When you consider a new location, you as a founder or the key management teams needs to be there, right? You cannot just think, oh, I'm just going to hire this person and everything go right. It's just not going to happen, right? So naturally you go, where would be this place in Asia that I would want to live at least for the next 2 years, or maybe a year of my life, right? If you look at that, then you actually make a lot of those pros and cons decisions for yourself, right? Is it going to be an environment that I feel comfortable building a company, right? where they have access to the talents, where they have strong support from the government, whether there's a startup community who I can talk to. How about the life that I'm going to get, right? Is it a place where I feel comfortable? Because if you're not comfortable at this new location, it's not going to work, right? So I think Taiwan, if you really look at all those things across the board, I think Taiwan is extremely appealing. I know I'm biased, but it presents a very unique value proposition. As I said, if you look at this as more a strategic operating unit, I think it has a bit of everything, right? Like, like the cost, I think people sometimes talk about cost a bit too much. It's not just cost, right? There are other places in Asia which are cheaper, right? But it doesn't have the same offering, right? Talents, I think we just never talk enough about talents, right? People talk about talents in Taiwan being lower or from an optimal cost standpoint, which I think completely misses the point. It's about the people, how we interact with them. It's about the commitment. This is something that is very, very important, right? As you build your new branch and operation. So I think those are some of the things. And of course, I'm sure every startup or company will have their own, decisions. But pick a place where you are going to be excited about staying here for at least 6 to 12 months. And from what I know, people come here to Taiwan, they don't want to leave, right? So it's a good thing. Experience it. Even try a few places in Asia, but I really think Taiwan right now has a lot to offer. I think Asia is an extremely important market. This is not about just me trying to sell Taiwan or Asia, right? Everyone knows in terms of the next big market is going to be in Asia, and we all know that, right? Now, the question for a lot of the startups is, so how do I get started, right? It's actually so much more complicated than that, right? Like, if you ask me to pick a country in Europe to start, right? Where do we start, right? So I think it's an important market. I don't think anyone can say, oh, this is not my market, right? This is a key market using all the KPI, population, GDP and population, all those numbers, right? Now, the thing is, so how do you get started? Just say startups, right? Which country will give you the best place to do your validation, right? And as I said, Taiwan has a lot to offer. And I think I haven't mentioned, if you're doing something more to the B2C market, Taiwan customers are extremely willing to try new stuff. That's another thing, right? If you're wanting to be, especially in this space about medical, Taiwan has 20 odd years of medical history. We have the best health insurance system, arguably the whole world, right? That's all that data, right? And so I think this creates a really unique situation if you want to come here. Some people look at coming to Taiwan as being the first step, and then you could do other countries. I think it makes a lot of sense because you really need to come here, experience the whole Asian culture, and I think Taiwan gives you a good taste of it, right? So it's not like uniquely like, oh, this is like specific, but it's kind of gives you this Asian culture experience, and then it helps you then expand, right? Because I don't think whichever country you pick, you're not going to be just do your business there, right? It's about Asia. So pick a place where, and then we've seen that, right? A lot of the MNCs that I know of, they are starting to build an innovation department in Taiwan for good reasons, right? So this is not just startup thing. Corporates are doing the same thing. So yeah, I think have a try, come to Taiwan, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed.